Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Before we begin, welcome to Whidbey Island, a real place in the USA. Feel free to Google Map to your heart's content and familiarize yourself with this very unique island. For I have a story never before told brewing from the mixed and mangled memories of my mind. And finally, nearly 4 years later, after some therapy and some help, I've finally begun mustering up the courage to write everything down and get this thing off my chest once and for all. My typing is far from speediest, I appreciate your patience. But here are some cool facts about Whidbey. Has one of the oldest air runways built ever in the US. Has a naval base but built another base back during World War II. Mostly woods and forestry. Fog is a common thing here that stretches to nearly every corner of the island. Wolves and large cats have been spotted on Whidbey, as well as other wild creatures. Free bus service, wonderful tourist trap. Largest town's population reached only 4,000 people. Pick is very relevant. That is me, the autist that is in a recreational group for the medieval times. This is how I vent my anger and how I saved my life nearly 4 years ago. Now, on to the story. It was my birthday, hanging near the end of October, back when I lived in Skagit Head, just hardly 300 yards from the cliffside that towered over the beaches on the bottom side of the island, which is, for the most part, filled with forestry. I remember the closest street lamp was a 30-minute walk away, making going to and from work a bloody nightmare during the winter months. Hawaii Lane, Google it if you are still suspicious. And rather than have a big old party with the family, I was too busy being preoccupied with something I am passionate about, helping others. Whidbey is practically a no-job zone unless you are one of the lucky ones. Many leave the island and head to Seattle just for work. My roommates luckily were able to keep a roof over our heads, and I contributed by doing countless hours of volunteer work, which enabled me to bring free food home, as well as borrow tools to help out with landscaping maintenance and other things. And even though I didn't have a job, I still managed to bring a sense of income home. I fixed computers and/or revive ancient machines and made them work again for basic use. I had finished tuning up an ancient optiplex and already called its owner to have it picked up, but seeing that was not going to be for another couple of hours, I decided to walk to the cliffside and see the Space Needle across from the Puget Sound. I recall hearing the sounder and even seeing it hug the coast from across the water, and seeing the Edmonds Ferry make its course in front of my very eyes. Yup, the simple life of Whidbey is pretty sweet if you are okay with being in a rural and somewhat remote place in the middle of nowhere. But my views changed soon after my 19th birthday. It wasn't late exactly, but because it was late in the year, the sun was nearly gone already. Luckily, it was also warm outside still, and not raining. Thank God it was not raining. I used to live in Florida, on the complete opposite corner of the continental United States, and even if it rained there, it was warm. Here, the rain is cold, and I protest nearly as bad as a cat that has to take a bath. Anyway, it was a pretty nice evening. I remember that I stayed on the cliff for nearly 2 hours maybe. I remember that because the Sounder, the train that leaves downtown Seattle and goes up into Edmonds in the afternoons, usually makes its run from about 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., and I remember hearing it choo-choo away and see it run up north along the coast of the mainland. Eventually, I headed back home. I had to in order to meet the person who wanted their computer back. With its old Pentium 4 and intimidating hyper-thread technology, I still had to wait for a while longer before I finished business with that. And as I was gonna do something else, I got a phone call. Hello? Ms. Neighbor.
To Miss?
Ms. Neighbor? Everything all right?
No, oh.
Gasp of air.
Have a being seashore.
I'm on my way, running out the door. I had a neighbor who suffered from a form of seizure, and since I was a local who worked at home practically, I got to be the one to call 911 and try to make things as good as possible for her. She had a child and a dog, and the child was hardly 6. so keeping the mother in a position in a way where I did not have to fear her potential vomiting, and keeping the child emotionally calm, and keeping the dog from investigating his owner. Things could be pretty stressful, especially since the nearest hospitals were either 40 minutes away or across the water. Either or, I always feared that whenever my neighbor closed her eyes that it was, well, the last time she ever would. I happened to live on a cliffside, giving me the advantage on the time it took to get to her home. And usually in most cases she is sitting up against the kitchen peninsula and some plate with food that fell onto the floor. I always made sure to be super careful and politely guide her to the couch, have her lay down on her side, and tell her to keep humming for as long as she can. I would make sure to tell her over and over like a broken record that everything is going to be all right. I also did this when on the phone with 911. They even applauded me for my calm approach to this rather intense situation. I was expecting tonight to be similar, but I would have never guessed otherwise. The front door was closed, as always, and as I peered inside, I didn't see my neighbor on the kitchen floor like most of the time. Not out of the ordinary. Usually she was either there or in the living room, struggling on the couch and being one step ahead of me. I open the door and immediately call out for her son, nothing. Also not new, many times he is too perplexed trying to figure out why his mother seems ill. The dog, however, without fail came running around the corner and ready to figuratively kill me. Least till he saw it was me, then his tail wagged and began shaking his ass like a puppy would. He also happened to be trained to be a medical dog, so after asking, "Where is she, boy?" he led me to her bedroom on the second floor. That is when I noticed something was odd. I'll explain in the next post. She was on her bed gasping for air. The room was a little cluttered and her PC was on. These were the immediate things I saw. And like most would, I made sure she was conscious, put all her pillows and even some of her clothes behind her to prop her onto her side. I didn't want her to vomit and accidentally suffocate herself. From there I cleaned up the room, aka moved everything to the walls, so when the ambulance came it would be easier for them, and so they would not trip on everything. I already was telling the person again what the street address was, and after she confirmed it was me and the same person, the lady on the line assured me that an ambulance was on the way. That just left me with finding her son, who I called for again. Right before his mother gasped for air again in between her hums. I kneeled in front of her again to make sure everything was all right, and she seemed to be trying to point to her computer with that shaking limb of hers. She looked scared, and I don't blame her, I would be scared too. So I quickly browsed the screen to see some tabs open. The screen was all weird and the colors were off, like if someone had used a magnet and tried to use it like a cloth and wiped the monitor clean. But for the most part, everything was at least manageable to read. The tabs had Facebook, Google, YouTube, and what looked like a blog of some sort. And my neighbor was looking at Slenderman shit. In my mind, oh great, she scared herself into a coma. But as strange as that was, I still had to figure out where her son was. So I took one final glance at my neighbor, made sure everything was in check, and quickly ran across the hall and into his room, peering my head inside to see if he was there. Nothing. I looked at the bathroom, the living room and kitchen again, closest, even the damn crawl space. Nothing. And that is when I began to worry. Hardly 5 minutes went by when I left her alone, and she was still awake when I got back to her. I had asked her where she saw her boy last, and that is when she told me.
He was with you.
I didn't say anything because I knew if I said no or that could not be right, it could scare her even more. The thought that someone was here and took her boy while she was undergoing a seizure, eyesight, hearing, all that would be hindered, if not gone. Which led me to believe that someone must have taken him. Fuck me. Soon after the ambulance came, they asked me a bunch of questions like always, and explained calmly that everything for the most part was taken care of while they were en route. Next, they asked my neighbor some questions, got her onto the bed thing, and took her to the vehicle. They asked me if I wanted to come along, but I told them I was going to stay behind this time, and that I was going to call her boyfriend and soon-to-be husband. Then she was gone, and my heart was racing, for a couple of reasons. 1, her son was still gone. 2, she thought I was there already, or so I thought. 3, My neighbor's mate is as intimidating as an ex-Marine could be, and I had to call him to tell him what happened. I dial, and as I am walking back inside the door, that is when I see her son and his scary as hell dad, and he was holding a gun. He asked me what happened since I was here. I told him what I did and managed to survive without soiling myself. He thanked me and asked me to take their son to my place. Well, ordered it really, but it was said nicely and calmly, and I was not about to protest otherwise. My initial fear was fading away though. I was going to walk away from the house with the Marine, who always intimidated me to no end. The boy and I were heading back up the hill when he began telling me what had happened.
Please don't let this be some Slender Man shit story. It's really good so far.
At first everything was cool, the boy was on my shoulders and I was asking about how his preschool went and everything. Meanwhile, my mind was calming down. My neighbor must have mistook her boyfriend for me, and luckily he was home too. I still wondered why the hell did he have the gun though. But screw it, I was just glad to help my neighbor and be heading back home. I was gonna let him play Minecraft on my computer and get a bowl of Cocoa Puffs ready for him till either his dad picked him up or until he crashed to sleep. Whichever came first. But he began telling me what had happened, and I intentionally won't go into all the details because I am pretty sure the family I speak of doesn't want their names mentioned, or to give enough details for some reader to figure it out. But to hit you guys up with the synopsis, before my neighbor went into the seizure, her and her soon-to-be hubby must have gotten scared because apparently the Marine was shouting out the windows and doors with the gun at the ready. Or at least this is what I am making out by the boy's limited vocabulary. We got to my home nearly 10 minutes up the hill, and everything else runs smoothly. I hear the music of zombies and creepers being slain by a sword in the hands of a child. I get WMMR, everything that rocks, going, and I have 2 bowls of cereal ready for him and I. Eventually he crashed, my roomies came home, told them briefly what went down, and we all agreed that it is a highly unfortunate situation for our neighbors, and that everything will get better soon. But my mind still wandered about the gun and why the hell was he yelling towards the wilderness around his home. No Slender Man here, but it was on her damn computer. Rest assured a non-lol. Much later, towards 11 o'clock at night, I woke up to gunfire, as did my roomies. And as much as I hate myself for this, I allowed my roommates to talk me into going down to the house. Longest walk down hill. So I eventually got there. In the dark, which does not help my confidence at all, and damn near get blinded with the motion sensor light device. The door was wide open, like all the way open, and at first I didn't see it. But as I got closer, the small windows on the door were broken. I stepped back into the kitchen and there was blood on the floor. The bar stools were knocked over, and even though I could only partially see the living room, that room was a mess as well. I look to my sides and see a baseball bat, pick that up and do my best to calmly call out for my neighbor, the scary one that is. Nothing. Get even more scared at this point. As much as I didn't want to advance any further, I eventually made it into the living room. From there I could see the back porch, no one in sight, least till I saw the ex-Marine, with the gun, scaring me shitless. I froze and he luckily didn't kill me, but his eyes widened and he used one hand to point at me. My heart could not have sunk any lower, because right then and there I also heard the slight breaking of glass. Without thinking, without warning, without hesitation, I turned and threw that bat at the doorway. And that is when I got the first glimpse of what was playing skirmish with my neighbor. No mythical beast or anything like that, but I still had a very good reason to be in fear. It was a man, wearing all black from head to toe, wielding what looked like a katana, only it was shorter. I think that is a tanto or something. He also had a mask on which was mostly white, but it also had bits of what looked like shining metal. I got points for hitting him really well because he grunted and ran back outside. The Marine gets inside and I must have seen his blood on the floor because he was bleeding from the arm.
Get the fuck out of here.
I heard gunfire.
Fuck off and on.
You're bleeding, maybe he... Shh. We both fell to silence and he must have forgotten to tell me to leave, because he was signaling me to follow with one hand, the other with the gun pointed to the bat. I get the bat, and I became best buds. After all, it saved my sorry, scared to shit ass. We make it as far as the driveway, and for good measure I pick up one of his trash can lids with my other hand. I was about to whisper what we should do next, but it all went dark. All the lights in and around the house went out, and immediately the Marine shouted,
The circuit box.
I ran with him because screw being alone in the dark with someone running around in a mask and having a blade. We're running back to the house, it's not even far away. We only walked like 20 yards maybe. And before we get back there, the lights are beginning to go back on, then off, like someone was messing with the master switch in the circuit box. The box was behind the house and on the electrical post. I know, weird, but this is Whidbey. It's not uncommon to see the circuit box on a pole outside of a home. Hell, we even have painted doors that we plant beside the roads like they were our mailboxes. Anyway, back to the story. We run around to the back, and as we turn the corner we see that fucker running to the other side of the house. The Marine fires thrice, and he chases the dude. I'm right behind him. Just as we get to the next corner, my neighbor jumps backwards and to the side. He was evading that blade I talked about. The masked man was waiting right there to try and catch us in a sprint. Now, I don't know how I didn't shit myself yet, and I still was scared. But I can say I had some years in martial arts training and my fighting passion with armor and heater shields. So, with more or less words, I took the chance to punch with my shield and ran into the man who was attacking my neighbor. All my attack did was draw attention onto me, because the attacker tried to hit me next. I drew my trash can lid back and turned my hips to whip the bat I had from behind me and crashed the end of it onto the side of the fucker's head. I stepped back after that, just realizing that a person with a knife made the Marine bleed, and my neighbor had a gun. I lost my cool then. I was about to run before my neighbor shot again. He didn't miss this time. My action stunted the attacker just long enough. He didn't kill him either, he shot him in the foot to keep him from running away. More orders from my neighbor, and a few moments later we stripped the masked man and have him tied in the living room. Not too long after the police arrived and we explained everything, and in that process we figured out that our attacker was meant to be in a ward this whole time. We cleaned up after that. I treated my neighbor's arm before the ambulance came. The cops stayed and took me home. Both my neighbors were at the hospital now. Their child was still sleeping, and never was told. Nearly a week later, I asked the Marine where his dog went. I learned that it was whimpering under the owner's bed when he was found. I still get shivers thinking about this, but I'm getting enough courage to speak out. In the aftermath, my neighbor still undergoes seizures, but they became rare. She was improving, and now is doing well. I eventually moved off island and returned to the mainland, and everything and everyone seems to be happy and moved on. What still stumps me is why would my neighbor even look at Slender Man shit? Let alone why that crazed pillhead went after my neighbors. He never did tell when asked or interrogated. Anyway, lurkers, hope you least enjoyed some OC. I also got to thank you all for reading. Because, well, speaking out, not bottling this inside, I feel like it helped me as well when explaining it all. Have a good night. OP out.
I live on Whidbey Island, a little north of Seattle. I've lived here for 12 years but did not grow up or attend any schools here. I've owned my own rental maintenance or landscaping business for the entire time I've lived here, and I've been over a lot of the terrain here. There is a depression on the south end of the island that forms a shallow seasonal pond approximately 200 feet in diameter. It appears quite tranquil and picturesque, but it exudes this bad, uneasy feeling on me. It's similar to biting down on aluminum foil. I get the coppery taste of blood in my mouth when I mow this one property. And there's almost no wildlife at all. Birds, insects, and deer are almost completely absent in the direct vicinity. The grass here grows weird. I can't quite explain it, other than to say it's unlike anything I've seen elsewhere. It's stunted and patchy at best, despite being in an area known for its temperate rainforests. Most grass has a grain to it. Even wild grasses, but here the blades seem to grow in every direction but straight up. And here's the weirdest thing. It seems to affect people in weird ways. The farmhouses I've been in all have the most bizarre floor plans and architecture. Odd angles, building techniques, colors, etc. I know one of the contractors that built here, and he's told me odd stories about the area. He said it was the most unfocused work he'd ever done, and all sorts of things went wrong with both the building process and the tools he used. Frying 30-amp breakers using 15-amp saws, plumbing that was obviously sloped for drainage that just wouldn't drain, etc., etc. He told me that house sucked the soul out of me. I'm not going to think that my time spent here has done the same to me, and I'm not an X-file by any means, but the place is bizarre. The only theory I've come up with is maybe the possibility of a large metallic deposit nearby, possibly iron, that somehow affects the magnetic field around it.
As a kid, I used to live on Whidbey Island, Washington State. Normal place, basically a giant semi-rural suburb, with a few state parks right in the middle of Puget Sound. Once as a kid, my brother and I saw what we called the pterodactyl flying over the trees above the field, then down the street. We were familiar with eagles, red-tailed hawks, owls of all sorts, seagulls, migratory vultures, you name it, we knew it. Our parents were very outdoorsy. This thing was big, bigger than a blue heron by a lot, and I remember its cry. High-pitched, but it echoed and sounded throaty. Pretty sure it was a bird, not a pterodactyl, but we didn't know another name for a flying bird that large. I think there are animals that exist which human beings are not meant to see. Also saw a glowing orb that phased through our wall and flew out the window when we were playing Smash Bros. The woods behind our house, we would see flashes of neon orange clothing in bushes. On the other side of the ravine, which we always ran away from, we called it the Woodsman. And we sometimes saw a stag deer taller than our dad, who was 5'10", with absolutely monstrous antlers. Allegedly, the elementary school there was built on an Indian burial ground. Heard this a lot as a kid. But that's incredibly hard to prove. Great fishing, though I miss that place.
I've seen some pretty weird shit in the sky. I used to live on Whidbey Island. It's full of farms. I used to walk 3 miles to go hang out with my friend, and I'd walk home super late at night. I swear to God I seen a flying saucer or some sort of disc or something above me, just slowly following me above the woods. And I remember reading that aliens vanish after they know you know they're there, and that they can detect your mind thoughts. So I just kept thinking about something else, but keeping my eye on the object, and it was so weird. Almost every night I experienced this. And almost every night I could feel an entity watch me walk home. Like it was just generally interested in me or something. I don't know, I never felt in danger, but more like they were either curious or making sure I didn't do something, or maybe protecting me, I don't know. Anyways, on that 3-mile road to New Yorker friend's house, there was a set of woods with a stone table in the middle. It was for sacrifices. I don't know, bunch of weird shit, LOL. All I'm saying is you aren't crazy. People experience weird anomalies and can't explain it. We may never know either.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.